Okay, Shalom Aleichem, everybody. We'll go through the next sugya in Yeshiva Sukkah from the last week's Marmakomas. Gemara and Memhema Beis in Sukkah, near the bottom. Amar V'Hud Amar Shmuel, Lulav Shiva V'Sukkah Yom Echad. Very interesting machlokas over here that he holds that Lulav you make a bracha all 7 days. In Sukkah you make a bracha only the first day and that's it. My timer. Lula de Misukkah Leilas Miyamim. So whether it's Deraisa in the Beis Hamikdash or it's Midrabanan now in the Gvulin where we are, still the nights are mafsik the days. So Kol Yom Mitzvah B'Fnei Nafshehu. Every day is a separate mitzvah. Sukkah de la Misukkah Leilas Miyamim. There's no hefsek of sukkahs from days to night because night is also chayiv in sukkah, whether you're eating or you're sleeping. Kulu Shiva Kachad Yom Ericha Dami. So it's all like one day. So it's one bracha and that's it the entire time. Rabba Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan Sukkah Shiva V'Lulav Yom Echad. He says the other way around. Sukkah should be 7 days and Lulav only 1 day. My timer. Sukkah Deraisa Shiva. Since Sukkah's Deraisa, you make it all 7. Lulav Derabanan Sagale B'Chad Yom. But Lulav was only Derabanan. The Chazal were stopik to just have one bracha the first day and the rest days are Derabanan. You wouldn't make a bracha. Which Lachor he's cholik on the Gemara and Shabbos, which is quoted over here also that you also make a bracha on Mrs. Derabanan because of the Sasser, and you're able to say Ashir Kedushanim Mrs. Obviously Vanu because of the mitzvah, which mitzvah of Lo Sasser, that you can't sway away from the Divrei Chachamim. That's the makor why we make a bracha and also on a mitzvah Derabanan. So evidently Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold that for. Kiyasar Rabin Amar Rabbi Yochanan Echad Zeh V'Echad Zeh Shiva. He says they both are all 7 days, and Amar Rabbi Yosef Nekod Rabba Barchana B'Yadecha D'Kul Amroi Kami Kavasei the Sukkah. By Sukkah we're going to make it all 7. So okay, so the Maisa would come out with all 7, and all 7 is going to mean that you could have learned the Gemara just to mean once during the 7. In other words, just like we said, the first sheet said there was only one bracha in the beginning, and that's it the entire time. So the one that holds 7 means once every day, and that's it also. Like you say Birchas Torah once a day. But the Rishonim are all going to tell us that, as we're going to see, that that's not going to be true. That when you say 7, it means lafuke, it's only one bracha, and that's it. On the contrary, it means all 7 days are chayav in a bracha. And all 7 days, there's going to be different times during the day that you could potentially make even more than one bracha a day. The question is how many and what does it take to mechayev that bracha. So that's going to be the nosei of our sugya today. We're just finishing off. We'll see the end of the sugya, and then we'll be able to come back and see how to learn this halacha l'maisa. So meisvei, also lulav v'atzma omer baruch shachianu v'kimanu v'yanu l'zman hazeh. By the asiyas lulav, you already make a shachianu. Not the lasas boy, then when you come to actually take it, you already said the shachianu on the asiyah. So that leave it the Gemara, you don't make a shachianu at the time of the kicha because you already made it when you put the lulav together, when you did the eged. And even if you paskin like with the Rabban and Alek Behuda, the lulav ain't sarach eged, so then still it's a mitzvah to be ma'aged it together. It's the shum zekeh levanveyu. So still you make the shachianu with the shas eged even l'didan according to the Gemara. You make a bracha all 7 days on the lulav. Now it's a sukkah la'atzmoi, and stuff called la'atzmo. We're not going to go into that right now. Why is it la'atzmo? Rashi says lo la'acherim. Also, you say baruch shachianu b'kimanu v'gam l'zanazeh. The shas asiyas a sukkah. Nichnas leisha ba amar sheker shanu t'savet tzivanu leisha b'sukkah. So the bracha is leisha b'sukkah, and we're going to see the Rishonim that although we perhaps are chayav in the sukkah and other things besides the yeshiva, but we said leisha v'sukkah is the Rishonim say based on the lashon pasuk the sukkah's teishu shivas yamim. So the Torah is kaveh the mitzvah of the yeshiva sukkah. So therefore the chazal are misakin the bracha lashon leisha based on that pasuk. So v'kevin shabirach yam rishon shulein v'varach kasha lulav v'lulav kasha sukkah. Kasha, Kamazman based on Mikdash Kayam, Kamazman Shem Mikdash Kayam. You make with Mikdash Kayam in the Makam Mikdash, you make it Kol Shiva. And Mikdash Kayam is Lomid Rabbanan, you'd only make it once, according to this Shita. The Sukkah Kasha, Tanaihi. So Sukkah's at Machogas Tanayim, If you're going to make it once, or you're going to make it all Shiva. The Tanya, tefillin calls man shemanicha mevarach aleim. Every time you put tefillin on, you make another bracha. So if you're mafsek, you go to the bathroom in a way that you're not allowed to wear tefillin, and come back out, you put tefillin, you make a new bracha. Div Rebbe, Recham Omrim, Enu Baruch Ela Shachas Bavad. One bracha only. So according to Rebbe, so the Gemara makes an assumption that Sukkah is like tefillin. Where exactly that assumption comes from? Why would the sushal be dafka tefillin? It's not so clear, but the Gemara makes that assumption that Sukkah is going to be like tefillin. So if you hold like Rebbe, that you make it every time you put it on, then Sukkah also, every time you walk into the Sukkah, you make another bracha. And if according to the Chamim, not, you make it once and that's it. And now the question is, how do you paskin over there by tefillin? That would be enough coming over here. So Itmar, Abai Amar Chazka Rebbe, Rabba Amar Chazka Rabbanan. So it's Malchus Abai of Rabba if you paskin over there by tefillin, like Rebbe or the Rabbanan. Amar Mari Ber Rav Shmuel Chazina Le the Rabba the Lav Kishmai say Rabba that said you only make it once a day. He's passing like the Chamim. We see that Rabba was not knowing that way the Maisa. Elam Maktim the Koy of Ayla Basic Isay Benafik Amash Yode Manat Tefillin Varach. He went when he was wearing his tefillin. He went out to the bathroom. He came back in. He washed his hands and make a new birchas tefillin. So we see that Rabba Lamaisa went like Rebbe, not like their Rabbanan. He made every time he went to the bathroom, he would come out and make a new bracha on his tefillin. So we paskin like Rebbe, and we make the bracha all 7 days. Which all 7 days, based on this, we see clearly from this Gemara, we do like Rebbe means not just once every day of the 7 days, because that would be like a chamin, but we do like Rebbe of Kol Shiva, meaning that every time we walk into the sukkah, we make a bracha. So the Pashtus of Gemara is telling us that every time you walk into a sukkah, as long as, let's say the poskim would say, the Rishonim would say that you had a Yetzia Gemura, like you walked out for something that actually was Mesiach Das from the previous Yeshiva sukkah, similar to going to the bathroom for the tefillin. If you have something that's similar to that would spell out that you had a Yetzia Gemura, then every time you walk back in again, you'd make another bracha. Doesn't say anything about achila. You don't have to eat in your tefillin to make a bracha on the tefillin, right? Shalos can you eat with your tefillin, but you certainly don't need to eat. So the sukkah also, every time you pashtus, you walk into the sukkah, you're gonna have to make a bracha, and that's the psak of the Rif. The Rif says clearly that it says here, it's in Taf Chaf Beis in the Rif. A sikna, maskana is the kol shash anichnas leisha b'mavarach leisha b'sukkah. Every time you walk in to sit in it, you make leisha b'sukkah. The Gamrina mitzvillin. We learn out from tefillin. The Tanya tefillin calls matzah menicham mavarach aleim. The Rebbe. The Kamal and Kavase. We pass on like Rebbe. You put on every time. The Rava kol emes the marach mavarach. But Mari Nami Amr to call emes the manach mavarach alayim kind of halacha. That we see from the Maisa of Rava, not like he has said. We see that he has to paskin not like that. So we see that that's the halacha. That's the psak of the Rif, and it's also the psak of the Rambam in Perik Vav Halacha Yud Beis. Kol zman sheikanes leisha b'sukkah, kol shevar kodesh yesha v'sher k'nasham tzadis v'an leisha b'sukkah. Every time you go in, doesn't say a word about eating. He just says when you walk into leisha b'sukkah to sit there. So the fact they say you're nichnas leishiv, so they're at least saying that you're walking in for the sake of mitzvahs shiva sukkah. You're not walking in just to look at the clock, see what time it is if the clock's in the sukkah. You're nichnas leishiv, but as soon as you walk in to sit there to be kind to sukkah, and then every time you're going to make a new bracha of leishiv sukkah. That's what you see from the Rif and the Rambam. Tosfos by us though see a little differently. Tosfos says echad zeh v'echad zeh shiva. On the end of Memheim Beis, and sukkah v'lulav shav in the bracha. There are different sukkah lulav. The lulav ein mevarach ela pamachas b'yam. Lulav is only once a day. Aval sukkah kol emas nichnas la kadesh yochal v'yishtev v'yashen afilu eser pami b'yam mevarach kol achas v'achas. Midid haviyat tefillin kol zman shevinichan. So Tosfos learns that he wants to shtel to the the Gemara's comparison, the Zustel to tefillin, is just like tefillin. It's not enough just to put them on your arm. You have to actually tighten them and put them on l'shem mitzvah to do a Maisa Hanachas tefillin. So Tosfos compares that to coming into the sukkah to do one of those things which it's usher to do outside the sukkah, achila, shtia, and shena. Tosfos is mamane, Tosfos is specifying those acts that you're going in for. That any of those, including shena, if you go into sleep in the sukkah, since it's usher to sleep outside the sukkah, then you make a bracha on those things. So the Tosfos seems to be saying that you're mekayim the mitzvah of sukkah when you do those things, which sounds very different than the Rif and the Rambam. The Rif and the Rambam say every time you walk in to sit there, you're already make a bracha. They look at tefillin. The only thing you need that's doing it to tefillin besides making a bracha again is that there's a hefsek between the last bracha. There's a hefsek hadas for some reason. You went out to do something that was far away, halicha, if you pass on halicha is hefsek, or you went out to work for a little bit, whatever. Something is misiach das from the sukkah, and you come back, and the minute you walk in, you make a bracha. Whether even if you're not coming to eat or drink or sleep, you're going to come in and you're going to say tilim, or you're going to come in and sit and talk to somebody for a few minutes, or whatever it is. You right away make a bracha. But Tosfos is saying that it's only if you come in to do those acts which are similar to tefillin, and that he holds the chiyuv is going to be when you have one of these three things: achila, shtia, and shena. So it says again, that in that way it's similar to tefillin, that if you do it 10 times a day or 100 times a day, you would do it. So if you want to eat 100 times a day, if you have a Yetzirah Gemara, and then you would make 100 brachas, but you need one of those acts to make a bracha on. If the sukkah comes up, you can't eat it outside. The reason why is sukkah different than manishtana, than say lulav. So he's saying that there you only have the mitzvah once a day. Here, every time, even if you're already ate once in a sukkah, let's say you're yotzei, it's not a question of your yotzei yeshiva sukkah that day. It's that you're not allowed to eat outside the sukkah. The Tosfos is tying together those things that are usher to do outside the sukkah, and not looking at it like a mitzvah kiyumis, you're mekayim it every day, but these things are usher to do outside the sukkah. Mainly you're chayiv to go in the sukkah, and mainly it's mechayiv your bracha as well. There, it's only a mitzvah once a day. That's Tosfos chiluk. Now Tosfos here is similar and different at the same time from Tosfos and brachas. Tosfos and brachas, Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis, Beis Yosef, the Taz mentions this as well. This Tosfos has a kasha on Birchas Torah. You make Birchas Torah once a day. My shtami sukkah shetzarach levarach al kol suda v'suda leisha b'sukkah. So why manishtana Birchas Torah from Birchas Sukkah? It's enough once a day by Birchas Torah. V'shleimar the shiny Torah she'enu yayish daito the kol shah adam mechuyav lilnoid t'ksiv v'yigisa v'yom v'layla v'habikamo yoshev kol hayom below hefsek. Torah, since you're mechuyav kol rega v'rega to be learning, just right now you have things that are holding you back, but then as soon as they're over, you go right back to the limud. You're never miyayish daito. Your das is always on the limud, so it's like you're sitting and learning all day with things going on in the middle. The best, but really best, you're sitting and learning all day. There's a shah kavua for achila sukkah. In other words, you're only making a bracha when you have your achila kavua, things that are machayev your sukkah by the achila. Even Tamar ain't anu mevarchim leishan b'sukkah. Why don't we make a bracha on the shena when you sleep in the sukkah? Yeshlamar the bracha da'achila shemevarchim leishan b'sukkah put rasoi. So the bracha of yeshiva sukkah, leishan b'sukkah, when you eat, that patters also the achila, or the shena, I'm sorry. Or he says in Inami, Vishnu Shema lo yushan v'avi bracha lo atala shar'im v'yoda lishan kol shashi yirtzeh. So maybe you won't fall asleep, and if you're making it on the shena, then it becomes a bracha lo atala. So the question is, why would that be a bracha lo atala? Still, so if you're in the sukkah. So okay, you didn't fall asleep, you're still in the sukkah. Why is that a bracha lo atala? So Tos is saying clearly that the tikanas bracha is only on those things that you're mechuyev in. And so that in that way it's similar to Tosas by us, but it's haluk that our Tosas says you make a bracha even on shena. And Tosas over here says the bracha, only bracha you're going to make is only going to be on achila kavua that has a shak kavua b'yom. Only on that you make a bracha, and that patters everything else. So Tosas and brachas is like the shita of Rabbeinu Tam, which is brought down to the rush by us. The rush by us, Perik Daled Siman Gimel. Near the end, he says, Rabbeinu Tam Pirish, Ikar Akeva Sh'adam Osam B'Sukkah Hi Achila. Avashar Til V'Shena Sh'osam B'Sukkah Tfeilim V'Gabi Achila V'Hi Potrasan. So he's mostly, what does it mean? What does Tosas mean by us? And I'm sorry, in brachas that the bracha of achila patters it, because Rabbeinu Tam says that everything else besides achila is tafel to the achila. The ikar is the achila, everything else is tafel to it. So even though there might be a chiv to do it, and the Rush points out that it's interesting that the shena should be tafel to the achila. The achila should be considered the ikar, because shena is even more chamor than achila. Because shena we know is also afilu shenas aroi, and achilas aroi is pater chutz sukkah, like I spoke about last week. But even so, even though that chumrah is true, but it doesn't make shena more chamor mitzad, I guess, the dasa adam, that the ikar in the person's mind is the achila and everything else is tuffled to it. It's still so it's the Rabbeinu Tam is a shver shita. The pashtus sugya, the muskanas sugya, but pashtus is like the riff in the Rambam that me'apam biyam you go in, it has nothing to do with achila. So Tosas by us already found a teretz to that a little bit. He's telling us that me'apam that the dimyon to tefillin is going to be. It depends how you look at the mitzvah sukkah. If you look at the mitzvah sukkah, just walking in is the mitzvah, or is it that those things you can't do outside the sukkah, then you're mechuyev to do that in the sukkah, and then that's a mitzvah. So, what to understand the nekudas hamachlokas between the Rambam on one side, the Rambam and the Rif, with the pashtus sugya that it's a mitzvah to walk in, and the Rush, the Rabbeinu Tam on the other side with Tosas and brachas, and even Tosas by us. The only chiluk between the Rabbeinu Tam and Tosas and brachas, between our Tosas, is do we say this for of tafel? They both agree that you only make a bracha on those things that you're mechuyev to do in the sukkah, that's usher to do outside the sukkah, like achila, shtia, b'shena. Question is, were the kaviyat dafka only on achila, or is it on all those things? On that, Rabbeinu Tam is a tremendous chiddush. Like Nechatesi to say that how do we deviate from what the Pashta Sugya is to go after only every time you walk in to go all the way to only Achila? Like where does Rabbeinu Tam get that from? How did that become the Iker? And to say that the Chiyuv is going to be pater, everything's batal and tafel in that Achila. I saw Rabbi Soloveitchik in his Shiurim wanted to say a chiddush to say that the pshat perhaps in Rabbeinu Tam is that since we find that Balayla Harishon, hopefully we'll get to the sugya if we have time to, the Laila Harishon, you're chayav to eat in the sukkah even by Yardu Geshamim. When it's Yardu Geshamim and it's not Geshmak, it's not came to do or to sit in the sukkah, then you're pater, and even Nikra Hedyot, if you sit in the sukkah, you're considered a fool to sit there. Except for Laila Harishon, that the rain really never stops. Then we're chayav to go out and eat a kazayas in the sukkah, even while it's Yardu Geshamim. So we see that achila is so chashuv that there's a time that you have to that for sure you don't have to sleep or do anything else in the sukkah at that time, but so we see the achila is so chamor that it's machaya b'fnei atzma even b'zman yard geshamim by Laila Harishon. Even though the other days are rishus compared to Laila Harishon, the kol makom you see a chashivas and achila is more chashiv in a way that everything else should be bottled to it. That's where Soloveitchik's kiddush. So I think that the news daiti it's not a raya because that really depends on another chakira, another shaila, which that's a whole separate sugya. If you learn the sugya of Laila Harishon, that is the mitzvah of Laila Harishon, that kazayas in the sukkah of Laila Harishon, that the mechuyev to eat in the sukkah, that we learned out from Tesvav from Achilas Matzah on Pesach, that just like we have a hekesh between Laila Harishon and Pesach, we have to eat a kazayas matzah on Sukkos. On Sukkos on Pesach. We learn that Tesvav that we have a chiyuv kazayas rishon to eat in the sukkah. I always tell people when the first night that just like we eat matzah very quickly and we don't stop in between, we don't talk in between, we lean over and eat it. It's also the first night of Sukkos and really first two nights because Nefta Sheni is the same thing on Chutz La'aretz. So we have to eat that kazayas with the shem mitzvahs achilas kazayas b'sukkah and eat it quickly and eat it the shem mitzvah of yeshiva sukkah of Laila Harishon. And so another raya that it's a mitzvah b'fnei atzma is we're mechuyev to eat that kazayas. And generally, the chiyuv in a sukkah kazayas is not mechayev in a sukkah. You wouldn't make a bracha on just a kazayas of pas. We said in the last sugya that until you eat yoser mikah beitza, you're patur from the sukkah. It's not enough to eat a kazayas, but there's still a mitzvah of kazayas belel rishon because it's not mitzad regular din yeshiva sukkah. It's an extra din. It's a separate din that you have to sit in a sukkah and eat a kazayas. That just like you have to sit b'aseba and eat a kazayas of matzah, the Laila Rishon of Pesach. So the mitzvah of the way the surah of eating a kazayas the first night of Sukkot is sitting inside of a sukkah, whether or not even if you're pater inside yeshiva sukkah because it's raining, but still you have to eat that kazayas there. So many say that the night that kazayas rishon of achila is not part of the mitzvah of Sukkot Teishu Shevis Yamim. If it's not raining in a chanami, you eat the suda there, then you're mekayim both mitzvahs. But when it's raining, the mitzvah to eat there anyway, from Desvegen, as we say, you have to anyway eat it there. So that's this whole separate mitzvah, not mitzvah of Sukkot Teishu Shevis Yamim. It's a mitzvah of the Hekesh Tesvav. So if it's a whole separate mitzvah, then it's not a raya that it's more chamor than anything else when you have the regular mitzvah of yeshiva sukkah. So ad kama that you have mechuyev to eat there, also mechuyev to sleep there. So that what Soloveitchik is saying that it will be a raya from that mitzvah of the first night. That's only a raya if you hold that that's part and parcel with mitzvah yeshiva sukkah. But if there's so many rayas that it's not, it's a whole separate mitzvah, then the raya would fall off. What does Rabbeinu Tam know that the kazayas is the ikar? So the Rabbeinu Yonah and Brachas, it's more mashma that's Tali and Dasa Adam, that people consider the achila to be the ikar, like you sit down and you're kaveir yourself the most in the sukkah to sit and eat there. So and mitzad diras Adam, mitzad the teishu and kendeduru, it's more like balbatish's for, not a lumbrish for like the Salvation thing. It's more of a balbatish's for the person's das is mostly on achila and everything else is secondary to that. So wherever Ben Tam gets it from, but it's certainly not the steamus of sugya. It seems to be mamish connected to the pashtus of sugya. So I think to explain the machlokas, we have to clear an essential chakira in the whole mitzvah of yeshiva sukkah. You have a question?
Yeah. If I guess maybe it would be enough, Kamina, but if someone wasn't able to eat in the sukkah, they're mitzvah or it's pouring rain and then it stops raining and then they can only sleep so they eat inside and then they can go and sleep in the sukkah. Would they make a leishi b'sukkah when they get there to lie down, or would it still be a potential, according to Tosfos, a potential bracha levatala if you haven't been able to make the bracha?
Yeah, so it goes back to all these shitas. According to the Rambam, you make a bracha. According to Tosfos, you wouldn't because you're choshish for the bracha levatala. According to the Brain of Time, you certainly wouldn't make it because we only make it on achila, period. We only make it on achila.
Right, but according to the shita that achila is more chashiv, if there is no achila, then I guess you would.
Okay, so excellent question. So you're being mechaben to the chayotim, which we'll speak about at the end. Mishnah Berurah brings down at the end of the simon. We'll have to speak about the chayotim. That what's the halach if you go to visit somebody's sukkah, the intention of sitting down, you want to just schmooze for a few minutes and leave, and you don't want to eat anything. You don't have no intention to eat anything. Do you make, even according to Ben Tam, would you then make a bracha? Okay, because like you're saying, it's a sort of tafel. It's tafel to the chila, so it doesn't mean it's tafel. Right. It doesn't mean there's tafel b'chalal to a chila, or it means, and you look at every yeshiva b'fnei atzma and say, in this yeshiva is going to be tafel to a chila.
Right.
That's the shaila. So just to possibly to explain the machlokas, the Rambam and the Rif on one side, the Pashto Sugya experience, all these other Rishonim, the Tosos, the Ben Tam, we can clear Hakira in the Ikar Mitzvah Shiva Sukkah. How do you look at the Mitzvah Shiva Sukkah? Do you look at it like it's a mitzvah kol rega v'rega to be in the sukkah, and it's mamash chiv to be in the sukkah every moment you can, and unless you have a good reason not to be in the sukkah, then you're mevatel the mitzvah. You're mevatel the mitzvah asay of sukkah's teishu shiva shem. All 7 days you should be sitting in the sukkah, and that is a sefer Yisod v'Shar Shavoda, one of the very very chashuv sefer Musar. But also we learn halachos from it. So Medaik brings sefer HaKolbo, or I think brings a Kolbo or Avud Ram, one of those Rishonim, that says with Farish that kol rega v'rega, you're not sitting in the sukkah where you could be, like you're sitting in your sukkah and then somebody comes to visit, so you go and you sit down on the couch in the house and snooze when you could easily go out in the sukkah. You have no tour, you have no reason to be outside the sukkah except for just a little more convenient to sit on your couch in the house. So he says kol rega v'rega, that you're not sitting in the sukkah, you're mevatel mitzvahs asay of yeshiva sukkah. Very very stark. So that's one side. The other side is maybe it's not a mitzvah kol rega v'rega. Maybe it's like tzitzis. Like tzitzis, for example, you're not mechuyev to wear a beged of daled kanfos. But if you do want to wear a beged of daled kanfos, then in order to wear it, you need tzitzis to be matir to wear that beged. It's a matir to wear that beged. That's the. So do we say perhaps sukkah is more like tzitzis? So the one that says this, Minchas Chinuch, I believe it's mitzvah Shin Chafei, if I'm not mistaken, that Minchas Chinuch says the taka mitzvah yeshiva sukkah is like that. He says it to answer Akasha. The Tosfos Daf Tes asks Akasha. The Gemara brings a drasha to pasel a sukkah gzula. Brings a pasuk to aser to make it that if you sit in a sukkah gzula, you're not yotzei de chavaso. That's the Tosfos asks that what do you need a pasuk for? Tepu klei mishum mitzvah ba'avera. If you're sitting in a sukkah that's stolen, even without a special pasuk to pato that mifnei atzmo, it's no worse than any other mitzvah ba'avera. Anything you steal and do it, we learn this by Lulav and the sugyas about this, and by kol mitzvahs, a korban, it's stolen. You're not yotzei. Can't make a bracha on it either. In the mavarach el manayetz, it's considered a curse, not a bracha. So why do you have to come onto a separate pasuk? Just say mitzvah ba'avera. That's Tosfos kasha. Answers the Minchas Chinuch that the din of mitzvah ba'avera is only when you're coming to do Ratzon Hashem, to Mekayim Ratzon Hashem through doing this mitzvah. You're mechuyev to do a mitzvah say, it's called on the Gavra to do that mitzvah, and through that mitzvah you're Mekayim Ratzon Hashem. So you ask, is the person Mekayim Ratzon Hashem or not Mekayim Ratzon Hashem by doing it? Is the way he's doing this mitzvah, it's a Ratzon Hashem, the Sheker Lulav, but it's also a Ratzon Hashem not to take something stolen. So if you take a lulav, a guzzle, how can you say I'm Mekayim Ratzon Hashem when I'm being over in Ratzon Hashem? So that's called mitzvah haba ba'avera. That's not a mitzvah. That's when there's a chiyuv on the gavra to do that mitzvah. Masha'enken, he says sukkah is like tzitzis. Tzitzis, you're not mechuyev to wear tzitzis. Just if you're wearing dal kanfos, it can't be without tzitzis. Huadin, he wants to say sukkah is that it's not that you're mechuyev to go be sitting in the sukkah. There's no chiyuv to sit in the sukkah. If you want to eat nothing or you don't want to sleep, whatever, then you can be wherever you want. It's just those things that a person does, both in kavua in his house, like achila v'shtia, the shtia going with the achila, or shena, if you're doing a shena, which is also considered always kavua, people don't usually sleep outside their house or eat achilas kavua outside their house. So the mitzvah Teshu came to do is machayev you that it's also to do those things outside of a sukkah. And Mamela, if you have a sukkah gzula, mitzad mitzvah avera, it doesn't work. It's not going to passel the mitzvah because the avera it's not a mitzvah kiyumis, it's essay on you to do it. It's an avera not to do it. So not to eat outside the sukkah. So even though you're eating avera, you could say that you still can't say you're outside the sukkah. You're still not eating outside of a sukkah. You're eating in a sukkah. It's not a question of Ratzon Hashem. It's just you can't be eating outside the sukkah, and you are. Mela, the Gemara has to come on to bring a special pasuk to tell you the sukkah gzula is pasul, even though it wouldn't be pasul beside mitzvah avera. That's the minchas chinuch. So there's not just
how does it seems like so different than tzitzis. Like I could walk around, I could live my life like if you're a guy, you don't have tzitzis and it's normal like that. You just wear a shirt and fine. But Teshvu Kein Taduru, you can't live without. You have to live. All the things you do for a living.
Also, that's exactly what it says. Those things that a person must do to live, like eating your main meals and you're sleeping, you can't go 3 days without sleeping, right? It says you're making neder, the Gemara and Nadarim make a shvua not to sleep for 3 days. Then you look at a yad because you can't go 3 days without sleeping. There's certain things that you need to do to live. So those ikar things you need to do to live, it's usher to do them outside the sukkah. That's only dugma to tzitzis. It's just that it's not that you don't have to do it at all. Just when you do it, then it has to be with tzitzis. So also over here, when you eat chila kavua, when you have a shena, when you sleep, then it's also to do them outside the sukkah. So it's not a mitzvah kiyumis, a mitzvah kiyumis on the gabra to be sitting in the sukkah. It's an isser to do those things outside the sukkah. That's the other katzeh shena, the other tzad over there. So perhaps we can learn that shaila and those achronim and is really the nekudas hamachlokas between Rabbeinu Tam and then with the Bali Atosis on one side and the Rif and the Rambam on the other side. The Rif and the Rambam are holding it's a mitzvah korega to be on the sukkah. Every time nichnas leishaba, every time you walk in, you mechuyev to make a bracha, even 100 times a day, even though you don't eat or do anything, because since you're mechuyev to be in the sukkah, sukkah teshu kol yamim. Shivas Yamim, that every moment you're supposed to be in the sukkah unless you have a special reason not to be in the sukkah. Like you don't have to make yourself not, if you want to go take a walk or whatever, you can't say, oh, I shouldn't leave the sukkah. The Chazon Ish was known to say that sukkah is not a jail. The Torah wasn't mechayev you to be in jail for a week. You're not allowed to walk out. If you want to go do something outside the sukkah, you're allowed to, but it's still a mitzvah kol rega to be there. The Rif and the Rambam say that every time you walk in, you make a bracha. And but Rabbeinu Tam and the other Bali Atosis are learning fakir. It's not a mitzvah to be there kol rega. It's a vera to do it outside the sukkah. So Mela, the bracha is only going to be on those things which you can't do outside the sukkah. So then they're only chalak in one thing. They're all on that side of the chakira. It's just that Rabbeinu Tam is machadesh as for of achila is ikar, and therefore there's no bracha on shena. Even though shena is also chutz sukkah, won't be a bracha on that because the bracha of the achila patters that. And Tosas by us holds that shena also, since it's also outside the sukkah, you make a bracha on shena as well. Tosas by us is not choshesh for the svara. You might not fall asleep. As long as you're trying to fall asleep, maybe that's enough to be okay to do. Or like you never know, even in your house, if you're going to fall asleep. You try to go to sleep, so that's also the attempt to go to sleep. That's also something you do only at home. That's also mechayev bracha. So perhaps that's the nekudas hamachlokas of the Rishonim. Now, the Rambam says another point over here. The Rambam says that you make the bracha kodem sheyeshev. Kodem sheyeshev. So the Ravid says that lo dak, and the Rush explains, he doesn't quote the Ravid, but the Rush also says that mechatesi should be before you sit, as if the Rambam is saying that the sitting ends off the mitzvah. Because what do you mean? It's a mitzvah mishmasheches. It's a continuing mitzvah. And the Rush brings right from Tzitzis that it says that misatif ba mavarach He's talking about after you already did the ituf, the ma'aseh ituf, then you go on and you still make a bracha because mitzvah tzitzis and mismashech continues on. So why should you have to stand over here and before you sit down, even if you sit down like you normally would do to make a bracha when you're eating a suda, you can make leisha b'sukkah if you're already sitting, and the kavanah is the hemshech of the mitzvah is going to be through the achila. You're going to keep on doing, and don't say that leisha ba yatim b'ka bracha on the ma'aseh yeshiva because it says leisha b'sukkah because it says sukkah's teishu yeshiva shamim as if it's a mitzvah to do a ma'aseh of sitting. The Rosh comes lafuke that for sure doesn't mean that. The Torah when it says teishu yeshiva shamim it doesn't mean quote unquote sitting. It means dwelling, and he brings rayas that it means to be it's akiv sham to dwell there, and part of the dwelling is for sure the eating in the sukkah. So it's considered a bracha over lasiyasan before the eating, even though it's already after you sat. So Mechatesi, the Rambam says it should be before you sit. So there are different. The Taz Balabatish, says that since according to the Rambam, the Taz says that the Shittas Rambam is like we said before that the etzem knisa is already mechayiv a bracha. If you would come in not to eat at all, you'd have to make a bracha. So just walking into the sukkah at all, the chain mitzvah sukkah is immediately chayiv even before you sit. So the Rambam holds that you should be masmich the bracha as close as possible to the knisa, to the zman achiyuv, as you can. Bishleim according to Ben Tam. So the mitzvah, the bracha was nitkan only on the achila. So it makes sense that you can sit down and make it as close as possible to the achila. But according to the Rambam, for carrot, the Rambam was even before you sit down, you should already make a bracha to make it as close as possible to the achila, to the knisa. That'll be the svara of the Rambam. I think you could also say in the Rambam that there's chal shal v'achronim that birchas and mitzvah should always be amida altogether. So why would the Rosh go away from that and say you can make it be yeshiva? Why is the Ravid? Why are they saying that? The Ravid and the Rosh. Why is it different than manishtan and mikol birchas and mitzvahs? You should always make it amida. The Rambam is right. So what's going on over here exactly? But according to what we said, it can make a lot of sense that if you hold that the mitzvah is the knisa is walking in, so then the bracha will be on that, and it's no different than any other brachas and mitzvahs. You should make it right away, and you should make it the amida. But if you hold that they're only masakin it on the achila, and it becomes part and parcel with the achila, we'll see how much in a moment when we speak about the shitas ataz. But it's mamish. They made they for whatever reason or better time, whatever his makar is to say it. Ren Tam holds that it was only nitkan on achila and everything else is tafel the achila, so it became like a chelik of the achila. Ad kadei kach that there's in Tafresh Mem Gimel there's a machlok Rishonim whether you should make when you sit to eat. What do you make first, leisha b'sukkah and then hamotzi, or hamotzi and then leisha b'sukkah? So the Torah paskins over there that we should make first hamotzi and then leisha b'sukkah because it's like tol baruch. It's like if there's things you make a motzi and then you realize you didn't feed the animals. It's usher to eat, so you can say go feed the animals, and it's not considered a hefsek between the hamotzi and the achila, because since that dibur that you're saying to go feed the animals is matir to eat, it's usher to eat until then it's not a hefsek between the hamotzi. Also, since you can't eat without yeshiva sukkah, and they made it mamish. According to what we're saying, they made it mamish part and parcel with the berachas hamotzi. It's a chelik of the hamotzi that you make the berachas yeshiva sukkah. So you understand why the Rosh and the Ravid are holding that you should make the bracha be yeshiva, even though it's generally berachas mitzvahs are said b'amida. But here, this berachas mitzvahs of sukkah, they made it part and parcel with the achila, and therefore, like a motzi is said while you're sitting. Also, this yeshiva sukkah is said while you're sitting, even after the hamotzi. Possibly according to those Rishonim. So that would be another hezbollah on the machlokas, the Rambam and the Rosh, whether it should be b'amida. The Taz says a tremendous chiddush, and see how far we take this svara of achila. The Taz says, and it's very good I say this Taz inside after I speak about it. If you haven't seen it yet, it's such a beautiful Taz. It's mamish the most geschmacka Tazes you can ever imagine. So the Taz says, according to Ben Tam, that, and he says that's the halacha. Paskin is halacha like a Ben Tam, the Taz, that since the whole din is tali and the chilas asuda, they're kaveh on the suda, and everything's tuffle to the suda. He wants to say, tremendous chiddush, that if you eat a suda, you made leisha b'sukkah, and then you finish that suda, and you bench, just like the benching is considered a siluk and a hesach hadas from hamotzi, and if you're going to eat another suda, you have to make a new hamotzi, because you for sure were gomer the last hamotzi by benching. It's a total hesach hadas and siluk from that original hamotzi. Even if you had das to eat more bread later, doesn't matter. Balkorchach, by benching, it's a hesach hadas and it's a siluk, total siluk, not a motzi. Who adin, it's a siluk from that leisha b'sukkah. Once you bench, that the previous leisha b'sukkah is done. And now everything you're sitting in the sukkah is only going to be tafel of arai, and it's a rai, and it's tafel to the next achila you're going to do. So mela, even if you never left the sukkah, you never set foot outside the sukkah, and you're the whole time you're in the sukkah drinking schnapps or whatever, or you're sitting and learning in the sukkah. So let's say you come and you have breakfast, you wash, come in, you make a leisha b'sukkah, and you have breakfast, you have your scrambled eggs and everything, in your bagels. You bench, you sit and learn the next few hours, and you're drinking whatever, and then comes lunchtime. Now they bring in the salami sandwiches and everything. So you never set foot outside the sukkah. Still, you're going to make a new leisha b'sukkah, because now you have a new achila, and they're kaveya the chiyuv bracha on the achila, and not only kaveya on the achila, the original leisha b'sukkah is nostalgic, because when you benched, that was goymer the bracha, which is nikfa on the achila, and everything else you do afterwards, you're sitting and learning, and everything else, mitzad the bracha is tafel to the next achila. So you make a new leisha b'sukkah. That's the shittas hataz. So he brings down the levush. It says that brings down this custom that people do. He said there are some people that do that, and he says tos biyodam, because you were never mistalik from yeshiva sukkah. The levush says. That's the levush says clear. It's a big tos to do that. It's a bracha l'vatala. And the Taz says no. Those people are right, and he's cholik very stark on it goes through step by step to try to rip apart the levush, and stands strongly with the shita that it's a siluk. And he brings it the Bach. Yeah,
the levush would be like the Rabbeinu Tam in brachos. Is that where he's going?
The levush is saying that even according to Rabbeinu Tam, he's not going against Rabbeinu. Even according to
no, he goes with the Rabbeinu Tam, because according to Rabbeinu Tam, the only reason you make multiple leisha b'sukkahs is because you're mesiach das. But if you're sitting in the sukkah the whole time, you wouldn't be mesiach das from the sukkah.
Yeah, so the Taz wants to say that the hesach hadas from the Suda
is from the yeshiva.
Hesach hadas from the Itzad the Bracha from the yeshiva kavua, the yeshiva, the ikra yeshiva. That's everything else is.
So the Taz would say even according to Rabbeinu Tam, you would make another bracha.
Not even. He's saying dafka according to Rabbeinu Tam.
He's saying daf. Okay. Well.
Dafka Rabbeinu Tam, because for sure according to the Rambam that it's not totally an achila. There's no havamina to say like this. It's only because it's tali in the chila. He wants to say it's ad kedekach tali in the chila. That you have another achila, it's a new chiyuv bracha. So the levush says that would be true, but only if you left the sukkah and you were mesiach das from yeshiva sukkah. When you're still in the sukkah the whole time, then there's no swore to say that like the tafel and batal. That's only if you had a siluk in the middle. But the Taz is very stark against it. And he brings also that the Bach says like him. Now the Bach, actually the Bach is not here. It's in Tafresh Mem Gimel in the Machlokas, whether you make the Hamotzi first or after the Leisha B'sukkah. There the Bach says that like the Taz, like his son-in-law, the Taz, but for a different reason. He says that not that the etzem benching is a siluk, but rather he wants to say that, let's say, for example, you made a bracha on tzitzis, and your das was that you have tzitzis, that the bracha goes only until 12 o'clock. After that, you should make a new bracha. Like the bracha is only for half the day, and you want a new bracha on your tzitzis after that. So the Bach seems to say that would work, like that the bracha you only have das on Yeshiva Sukkah until the following Suda. The whole bracha Yeshiva Sukkah, since it's telling you the Suda, it's kilo you're made a tanai in the bracha that bracha is only chal until the next Suda. We find similar things. So we find solution like that. We find, let's say, that there's a Ritu Kaczynski in the Luach Eretz Yisrael says that we should, when you say Birchas Torah, the morning of, let's say, Erev Shavuos, you should have das in order to get out the machlokas, whether you need a new Birchas Torah the next day. You should have das when you make that bracha, that the bracha is only chal until the next morning. So we can make stipulations sometimes in brachas like that. So they want to say that the Bach wants to say something similar over here, is that when you're making a stipulation, it's as if there's an unspoken stipulation in your bracha. Tonight, when you make a bracha on the first Suda, the bracha is only chal until the next Suda, since every Suda is a swar l'chai. So it's mitzad the hesach hadas of the person. That's a little different than the Taz. The Taz is saying that even without your das, the fact that you benched forces hesach hadas. Even if you had das, the bracha should go with all day. Doesn't help, because once you benched, that's bal korchach. Like the das doesn't help for a motzi to continue, and once you bench, it doesn't help for the Yeshiva Sukkah once you bench. So it's like the Bach, but different in a sense inside the Lumdus. So So I think that we have to say, according to the Levush, how do we have to explain the Levush is that the svara of Tafel is not a svara in Kol Yeshiva v'Yeshiva. That you have to look and see whether it's Tafel or not. It's a general svara of why they are all in the Misaken and on Achila. Because since generally speaking, everything else is bottled to the Achila, so then that's the way they were misakin the Birchas Yeshiva Sukkah. But don't take it l'kula to say that once you finished, start another achila is m'chayav a new bracha. I'll tell you what nafkamina. Now let's say an opposite nafkamina. That what you asked before previously, the Taz says at the end, according to his svara, that let's say you're going to go the entire day and not eat anything all day, or you're making a tanas chalom. There will be no eating all day. So the Taz says that you would sit down, then you would go back to the Ikra din, which he considers what the Rambam and the Rif say, that's Ikra din the Gemara, that's like tefillin, then you really mechuyev every time you walk in. Just the Rebbeinu Tam has a sport of tafel. So if it's not tafel to anything, it's not bottled to anything, then you would go back to make a bracha. If you're not going to eat all day, then just as soon as you walk in to sit there, then you make a bracha. The Magen Avram goes with the Levush. He's cholak on the Taz, and he holds like the Levush. Magen Avram. He holds that makes sense, and we see like that from the It makes no sense to say it says Magen Avram that you should make a new bracha when not like the Bach, when you make a new achila. But the Magen Avram also says that if you would go and sit in the sukkah without eating, then you would not make a bracha. So here the chumrah becomes a kula, and the kula becomes a chumrah. The Taz that generally says you make it's totally in the achila, and you make a new bracha every time. He holds this legamri tafel. It's all about tafel. When there's no tafel, then you make a bracha without achila. According to Magen Avram, it's in the Levush, it's more of a general svara of why they said to make the bracha only on the achila. But once they said it. The bracha only goes on the achila. So mainly, if you would come and sit without an achila, even though there's no tafel right now, still there's no bracha because Chazal only were sakin to do it on the achila. So the same Magen Avram that says you would not make a new bracha if you had a new achila, because that's just a general reason why they're masakin on the achilas. We don't have to look at every yeshiva whether there's a tafel right now or not. But it's a general sfora of why they made the bracha on that. So once they made it, then that's all we make a bracha on. So we have two opposites over here. The Taz will say, if you even a new suda, you make a bracha. But if you eat no Suda, you would make a bracha without a Suda. Magen Avraham says you wouldn't make a new bracha on a new Suda if you never left the Sukkah. But if you had no Ichila at all, you wouldn't make a bracha either. So the mamish two opposites. You could ask, why does the Taz have to say that you're not eating all day? Why does it say Kol Hayom? Why does it stipulate that? So I think that according to the Taz, why don't you just look at every time you sit there? Because according to the Taz, we don't look at every yeshiva as a separate act. It's just we look at the overall tafel is the entire day. Do you have any achila that day or not? If you do, each different sukkah you sit in is not a separate mitzvah, because it's not a mitzvah to sit in the sukkah, it's just an avera to eat outside the sukkah. It's a nafkamina of let's say I'm eating in my sukkah. And now I get up and I'm not mesiach das from sukkah, but I walk to my next door neighbor's sukkah. Is it like putting on a different talis that I make a new bracha? Or is it it's totally on this. If you hold that it's a mitzvah to sit in the sukkah, so now you're getting a different yeshiva sukkah and a different chesed shel mitzvah. So I'll make a new bracha. But if you hold it just an avera to eat chutz the sukkah, so if I wasn't mesiach das, so then it's not a chesed shel mitzvah. It's not that a mitzvah kiyumis. It's just that I can't eat outside the sukkah. So now if I wasn't mesiach das and I go to eat more in another sukkah, then I wouldn't make a new bracha because it's not mafsik between. I'm weiter wasn't eating in one sukkah. Now I'm also not eating outside the sukkah. So in the same way, I think that's why the Taz looks at all day, because you don't look at each separate yeshiva, but you look at the whole day, whether it's tafel or not. And the only time you would make a bracha without eating would be if you're not going to eat the entire day. But if not, even if you might have another yeshiva later on, it's not a separate Maisa yeshiva, it's just another chance not to be outside the sukkah. Here I'm saying that's a nafkamina. So now the Mishnah Berurah halacha Maisa passes like the Magen Avraham, not like the Taz. He doesn't even mention the Taz in the Mishnah Berurah. He just says a double pashat that if you're eating in Sifkat Mem Vav, the Mishnah Berurah says that if you're eating one suda, you bench and then you wash again later on. You never left the sukkah. You're not mesiach das from sukkah. He says that keep rubam kukulam, all the achronim hold like the Magen Avraham, not like the Taz. They all pass like the levush. You do not make another bracha. They say only, but the only times the machlokas is if you left almanas lachzor, you actually walked out of the sukkah, and then now you have another suda, but you weren't mesiach das, but you actually walked out. So there you talk about machlokas, but halacha l'maaseh paskins also that if you never had a real hasach das, you would not make another bracha, even if you actually walked out of the sukkah. You walked out, go to the bathroom, and came back. You would not make another bracha, even if you had another suda. Only if you left the Yitzia Gemura, like you went to work for a while and then you came back, then you make a new bracha. Okay, then Mishnah Berurah speaks about if you left to go to shul in the middle of your suda and then you came back. So then that's telling the machlokas achronim, which we had back in Siman Ches Nechos Tzitzis, whether halicha is considered a hefsek or not. And according to the Magen Avraham himself, that holds halicha lo abi hefsek, so then it would not be considered a hefsek in the middle of your suda. However, if you benched, it was between two sudas, like you benched for one suda, then you go to daven in order to come back to eat another suda. So you had total intention to come back, but that will say halicha is a hefsek, the b'tzira of all these other sforas that you would have to make a new leisha b'sukkah. Now, one last nakuda, the Mishnah Berurah speaks about in the end of chapter Shlamites, it brings down the chayadim. That if you, let's say, go, what you asked about before, holach l'sukkos chavero, famous question. If you go to sukkos chavero, almanas not to eat, or let's say your own sukkah. Let's say you benched, you went to daven, and you worked a little bit, whatever, and you come back to the sukkah, and you know you're going to sit down and learn for a couple hours. You're not going to eat or drink anything, and you're going to go back out to daven mincha later again, or to daven marv, whatever it is. So you're sitting in your sukkah, sitting and learning there for a whole yeshiva sukkah without any das to eat whatsoever. So the Chayadim holds that in that case, even according to Ben Tam, we paskin like that the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Hayaram. It says you would make a leisha b'sukkah because the whole svara of tafel is gone. There's no achila to be tafel to. So your das is to be in the sukkah, be kindness to shiva sukkah without any achila, then you make a bracha. So Mishnah Berurah quotes it. He doesn't bring anything cholik on it. The Maisa we can't go into right now, but there seem to be certain steers in the Mishnah Berurah because earlier in the Siman, it seems like the Mishnah Berurah was only machayev in a case where you are eating something. Seem to be some steeras, and it's brought down Shem Rebecca Kamenetsky that he said a klal l'gabe this Mishnah Berurah that, and it's a klal for all over Mishnah Berurah that when the Mishnah Berurah just says a halacha and in the bottom he says achronim or quotes who it is, then he's just passing it that way. If he quotes the name in the Mishnah Berurah, then like he's here, he says kasav chayadam. He doesn't necessarily mean to pass that way. He just means to let you know there's such a shita. So it's not so clear if Mishnah Berurah was passing in that way. I once asked for B'Yashuv Zatzal, and he said that the halacha is like the Chayarim, like the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Chayarim. So B'Yashuv held it's not a stira, and the halacha is like the Chayarim. That's I heard from B'Yashuv. But then I heard from his son-in-law, who was real Arabach Shlita, Rishon Zalman's son, who was B'Yashuv's son-in-law. I told him what his fair said, and he said that he saw Be'ena of Ra. He was with B'Yashuv a number of times when he went to visit other sukkahs, and even by his own sukkah, when B'Yashuv came to the sukkah not to eat anything, he did not make a bracha. So it's similar to the Gemara of Rava Paskin one way, and then we saw that Rava was knowing differently. So Rav Yosef was knowing not to. Rav Shlomo Zalman, it's brought down my Rabbi Shlomo Zalman in Halichos Shlomo says that he wants to say a news for why not to make a bracha if you go to visit your friend in a sukkah. He says that Sharat Sion says right there on the spot, Sharat Sion brings down that if you go to somebody's sukkah to be gova choyboy, you're going to somebody owes you money, and he's sitting in a sukkah right now. So you go into his sukkah in order to collect your chov. So you don't make a leisha b'sukkah because you would collect that chov whether he was in a house or in the yard or in the sukkah. You're not going there because it's a sukkah. You need to be going to the sukkah because it's a sukkah. So he wants to say that if you go to visit your friend in a sukkah, you would visit him also if he's in his house. Happens to be he's in a sukkah right now. So to visit your friend, since the equal reason you're going is not to sit in the sukkah, you're going to visit your friend. You would do that even if he wasn't in the sukkah. So then that's like going ligvos chovo, and that's why you're patur from yeshiva sukkah. However, Rosh Zalman added that if you would not go to visit him if he wasn't sitting in the sukkah, and there's whole reason you're visiting him is because now it's sukkahs. That's the time that you visit him on sukkahs because you want to sit together in the sukkah. So then the halacha will be like if you plan not to eat anything, then the halacha would go back to be like the chayarim that you would make a bracha. And a Hanami, Rosh Zalman said that if you're kaveh yourself to sit and learn in your sukkah, and you have no kavanah to eat, then the reason you're in the sukkah is only because it's a sukkah, not because you happen to be out in the sukkah, or there's taka reason why you're sitting in the sukkah. So b'chia gavna, he says taka, you should make the bracha, and they say in his name, Rosh Zalman's name, that it really should make a difference how long that is. Like let's say people have a minute to walk into the sukkah to shake their lulav before davening, to make a bracha on the lulav, because there's an Indian to make it up the arizal and everything to make it inside the sukkah. So since you're walking in the shame being in the sukkah, before you should have to right away make a bracha. Also, before you shake your lulav, you should make a leisha b'sukkah. But the Maaseh said lo nagu ken. For some reason that's not the minute. Maybe because some achronim say that there's an Indian of kfiyus. You have to be kaveya, like you're nichnas leisha ba. There needs some level of kfiyus to sit in it, or to do something, eat there, do something there, both in kavua. So just to go and shake your lulav is not kavua enough. Maybe it's in the Hilchos Brachos. Akapanim is out of Sfora, he held that really you should. So it's a very just fascinating shaila which comes up very often. Halacha l'maisa. Okay. So next time will be next year. I'm not sure if we'll have a shiur this coming Thursday. because it'll be right after Rosh Hashanah and not too much time to prepare on the sugya, but I guess we'll figure out when the following week to do it. We have one more sugya we'll hopefully to try to do before the end of this month. And hopefully there'll be an announcement soon to everybody about the specifics of the Chag Smicha and when, where, and if we're going to hopefully have a pre-event as well for everybody to get together. So in the meantime, to everybody. It should be a good event store. Everybody should have a Gevaldig year of Steiging and Slacha with all your Avodas HaKodesh and Nachas from your families and good health and Parnasa and Geshmak, and continue to do great things this coming year.
Good Shabbos, Ksiva Tova.
Also.
Kick Sure.